Catrice. It's Mary. I think we're at about 9:02, 9:03. Would you like to begin?
Absolutely.
Okay, let's start. Good morning, everybody. I'm Mary Lucal, Associate Vice Chancellor for Human Resources, and we welcome you to this morning's webinar, Exploring Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion in our Staff Performance Reviews. Vice Chancellor Small was called away for another matter, so I am very happy and honored to be joined by my co-facilitator. Catrice, would you like to introduce yourself?
Good morning, everyone. I'm Catrice Morgan. I'm the Interim Associate Vice Chancellor for Diversity and Engagement. I'm the Director for the Office of Equity and Diversity. I'm still getting used to that after all of these months. And it is a pleasure to be joining you today. And again, I'm here for Vice Chancellor Small. I will not, I'm certain, do as fine a job as he would do, but I will do my absolute very best to help you all as we try to navigate this area together. So thanks for joining us today.
Thank you, Catrice. And just a couple of housekeeping things before we begin our program this morning. We'd like to ask you to remember to put questions in the chat, please. We have a pretty large audience with us this morning, and it will not be possible in our 45 minutes together to get to every question, but we'll get to as many as we can. I have a colleague who's going to assist me in monitoring the chat. So if you'll pop your questions in there. If you have something that does not get addressed and you need sort of a little consultation or further conversation, feel free to drop a line to hr@utk.edu and we will reach back out to you just as quickly as Catrice and I are able to. Okay, well, let's just jump right in. I've got to advance the slides here. Okay. Okay, just a kind of quick overview of what we're going to talk about today. We are going to talk about our annual performance review, of course, for staff. We're going to talk about what is staying the same with our new online performance review, or what we call OPR, just to save a little time. We're going to talk about a couple of new features that have come in with the OPR. And of course, I think the main focus of our time today is to talk about the new diversity and inclusion component for the 2021 calendar year. But chiefly, after Catrice and I do a brief presentation, it's a very short slide deck, so we do not want to talk at you extensively through these slides, but what we really would like to do is spend the majority of our time this morning responding to your questions. So that is how we are going to manage our time this morning. We already have a question, which is, will the slides be available later? This webinar is actually being recorded and it will be available on our HR website. And Catrice, if you feel like you want to link to it or put it on yours too, that would be great. Okay, so I'm going to talk a little bit about just the performance review in general, and I'm sure several of you in the audience are already familiar with this, but in a nutshell, the review is meant to enhance the working relationship and foster discussion, not only about the past year, of course, but to set goals for the following year. We always want to document past performance, whether it is stellar or whether there are a couple of issues that should be addressed for the following year's planning. Talking about goals, and I'm excited to talk a little bit about how our new OPR here in a second is going to make the goal process a little bit easier and faster for all of us. And of course, in our performance reviews, we want to provide employees with an assessment of how things are going. And I am going to talk a little bit about how, just some special thoughts about 2020, because we would be naive to say it was, just like any other year. The last thing about staff performance reviews is that it really is a key component of a paid for performance system, which is what we have here at UT. It definitely helps us as a tool when we're making those sorts of decisions. We will hear later from our treasurer's office about guidelines about merit, any possible merit. I think we were all quite encouraged by the state of the state this week, but of course, until we know for sure. We want to just be cautiously optimistic. But again, part of the role of the performance, the annual review, is as part of that pay for performance system. And again, in case I did not say it, the review year goes from the beginning of January through the end of December. So what's staying the same with our new online performance review? We are still following, as we always do, HR 0129 performance review. It's the very familiar format as you have seen in the paper forms in all these years, the summary form. It will look and feel very similar, almost exactly the same, as a matter of fact. In the goals area, as you're setting goals for 2021, you can create goals in there. Next year, when you come back to do your next online performance review, you will be able to import any goals that were left over from the previous year or pull them in and modify them. Not going to get too into the weeds of the technical components of the new system, but just suffice to say, once you get in it and are practicing with it, you'll see that it allows you to import goals from the previous year, which will be a really nice feature for us going forward. The supervisor actually initiates the electronic review, but I do want to just point out that one of the ways that we have seen a lot of people handling this so far is that they get a self-assessment from a staff member in advance of the supervisor going into the online system and initiating the review, so that the supervisor has an opportunity to see where the employee, see the employee's thoughts about their performance the year before. So there are a number of different ways that you can go about that, but that's just one suggestion. But the supervisor initiates the review in the online system, scheduled conversations. We never want an electronic system to take the place of real live human conversations, particularly these days. We need as many of those as we can. Of course, look at the self-assessment form either before they initiate or sometime in this process, and then work through that goal setting process. And what I have found in my just working on mine with my staff is we have sent it back through workflow several times. So it's not like it's a one-shot thing. You can really go back and forth and have continuing conversation as you develop that review together. So what's new about it? Obviously, it is an online system, and I really want to thank again our partners at OIT for helping to design this tool. It has been just remarkable to have in our partially remote world right now so that people can manage the review process from wherever they're working. You also have the ability to attach documents. Again, I'll use my own example with my staff. We're using that attach feature to attach self-assessment documents. Very convenient to have it all together in one spot. Of course, part of the whole purpose of us being here with you today is to talk about the new category for the 2021 review, which is a diversity and inclusion category. And then, as I said, I do want to talk for a minute about how do we handle 2020. I mean, it was an extraordinary year. I think it's a great idea for supervisors to give employees the opportunity to just talk. Tell me about last year. What was it like for you? What were new things you did? How did you, stand up and go remote if that is something that describes you? How did you rework processes? Give them a chance to shine and hear about last year, because I think many of us will find that there are a lot of things that happened that we were not even aware of because we were deeply trying to sort out our own jobs and keep things afloat. So I think it's a key idea to just acknowledge 2020 and really just have a really good conversation about it. I've got a couple of quick questions, Catrice, if you don't mind. They're just about OPR. Someone's asking that someone says their name is wrong in the OPR. How do I correct this? The answer to that is that OPR connects with Org Chart Manager. So I would either talk to the person in your office that manages Org Chart Manager or contact the help desk to ask how you could make updates in there. The next question I have is, will 2019 reviews be uploaded into the OPR. Unfortunately, they will not. But again, moving forward, the OPR will contain at least 2 years of reviews, which again will make it convenient to import goals and refer back to those documents. Another question, are there templates for employees to use to gather thoughts or ideas prior to initiating an OPR for self-assessment? That is one that I may ask this person to contact employee relations to talk about that question, because I want to understand it a little bit more. So I'm going to ask to table that one if that person would contact employee relations, please. Okay. Catrice, let's keep going.
Okay, so you might ask, why is it that a new category is being added to our online performance review? And the short answer is that the Board of Trustees and our chancellors on October the 23rd of 2020, they reaffirmed and updated the university system diversity statement. And it was a statement that you, of course, can find on their website. But basically, it's just reminding us that in order for us to provide a quality educational opportunity at this point in time, it is important that we make sure that it is clear that different points of view and backgrounds are important to the work that we need to accomplish. And so that is why there has been a change. There's often, you often hear Vice Chancellor Small say, what gets measured gets done. And so we wanted to create accountability for employees at all levels with respect to diversity and inclusion. And so that is why you see the addition of this particular element or key in the performance review. In terms of research, what we know is that teams that come together that are that have a different variety of people on them with different points of view, backgrounds, things of that nature, that they tend to get to decisions quicker. They have more robust conversation about those. They're often creative in their decision making. You often see different disciplines, different cognitive approaches, personality, leadership styles, any of those things that add to what we have there. In addition to that, you know, I think the third point on the slide prior to that mentioned that it's the right thing to increase functionality with respect to a multicultural workforce. And so we are wanting to change the culture at the university so that it is inclusive. We're not trying to make a colorblind culture, but what we're trying to do is to value everybody and to encourage everybody to participate at the university, to think that this is an awesome place to work and to learn because we have so much to offer. And so we're here at one of our favorite slides. 20% of the folks who surveyed say their desire to stay in an organization is linked to feelings of inclusion. And so you might say, well, what does inclusion mean? You know, inclusion is more than simply being invited to the party. It's often talked about in terms of being invited to dance, you know, being engaged in conversation when you get there, being, you know, welcomed with open arms and just really, you know, being included in all the things that happen. So in a workplace, what does that look like? That looks like knowing that when you get there, people are happy to see you, or at least not unhappy to see you, right? And that you may be included, you will be included in meetings and team activities and all of, you know, the things that would make you look forward to going to work and to being a part of the team, and knowing that we are engaging and making sure that we have a good place for people to learn and to grow here at the university. And so my next slide, please. So here, you know, some of the things that we mentioned, you know, we talked about the fact that, you know, we have the second bullet there where companies have inclusive business cultures and policies. We see a 59.1% increase in creativity, innovation, and openness. And that's what we're looking for. We want everybody to bring their best selves to the table. We want everyone to know that this is a place where they can thrive and be and improve our opportunities for the students here in the state of Tennessee. And we want to have a place that's good for us to work, where we feel comfortable with the things that are happening here. So that's what we're trying to accomplish. I feel like I can't decide if I'm going too fast or too slow, because I know we want to have plenty of time for questions, and I think that we have quite a few in there. So if we could
Yeah,
advance.
Catrice, do you want to, we've got some really good questions coming in. Do you
Okay,
want to take a couple?
let's just jump into the questions. I feel like,
Okay,
you all
okay.
can read.
Yeah,
I
I
don't
didn't
know.
want to rush you through this particular slide, but some of the questions coming in are going to link up
Okay,
really
well
nice.
let's go ahead and take those questions.
Okay. Our first question that has just come in, will the score range grow from 25 to 30 given the new category? And it's a great question. The answer is that it will not. We're going to stay with a 25-point rating scale, so to speak. And in 2021, the new diversity and inclusion category will replace adaptability and flexibility. So that accounts for staying at the 25 range. And the other question we got that is a very interesting question, Catrice, is the D&I category just for hourly staff? Do you want to take that one?
I will be happy to take that. I think I mentioned it, but I moved through it pretty quickly. Every single employee of the university, from the chancellor down to, I'd like us to call us the average Joe working, hitting it every day. Everybody will be expected to participate in our diversity and inclusion efforts. Every single employee. So the challenge will be, of course, we're hearing those questions, how will I do that? I don't, if I don't have a student facing position, or, I tend to work with just the books, or I work with numbers, I spend all my day with computers, or I'm in the lab, or what have you. So what we want to remind everybody is that every single person is accountable for diversity and inclusion. Everyone is expected to engage in a manner that's appropriate for your area. We recognize for some people that will be easier than others, but it is everybody's responsibility at the University of Tennessee to create an inclusive environment where everybody feels welcome to come here and to learn and to grow and to participate fully as employees of the university.
I'm so glad I asked you to answer that, because that was such a great answer, and I appreciate the big picture you just provided for us. Questions are coming in really fast, so the ones I can kind of speak to from an HR perspective, Catrice, I'll grab those.
Okay.
We have one question about a person who might receive a 1 in accountability and dependability, maybe how to handle that. I would say that is a situation that human resources ought to be involved in. So if I could ask this individual to contact either Julie Rowe or Daryl Eastley, I think that a little conversation there would probably be helpful. We also, Catrice, have someone talking about 2020 impact, which I guess I acknowledged and mentioned earlier on. This comment says employees are really hitting a wall that continues into 2021. I think we all can understand exactly what is meant by that phrase. It's been a very tough year continuing into 2021. Will we be able to integrate pandemic response and mental health into our 2021 goals? Because people are really exhausted, motivation issues, etc. And Catrice, I mean, maybe we answer this one together. My take is that if issues related to COVID continue to impact someone's work life into 2021, it certainly, to me, seems part of what should be discussed for 2021. Do you have a thought about that?
I think we need to think of, our performance reviews, and I'm sure Mary would agree with this, in a holistic way. And so I think that everything that, has the potential to impact an employee's effectiveness and efficiency is something that, as a supervisor, you should be willing to take on. Now, I don't know how appropriate it would necessarily be for you to be very specific with respect to some of those things in their performance review, but I think you most certainly, should talk about what strategies might be appropriate. across the board and take a holistic approach. And I think that for us is the way we are thinking in terms of diversity and inclusion, that it is a holistic approach that should be woven through everything that we're doing. And, you know, so I would say that we would most definitely want to take a holistic approach, provided human resources okay with that.
No, I agree with you, Catrice, because you know certainly we are all still being impacted by schools going red. You know, our own personal issues continue to be impacted by COVID, and that does impact us all. It doesn't stay out in the car when we come to work, does it?
No, not at all.
This is a question I think that you could probably answer. Is there a list of approved websites or books regarding D&I that we can use as a resource for discussions and information in line with the UT mission? And I feel like I've seen something like that.
There are some resources available on the University of Tennessee Knoxville's diversity and engagement website. And they are continually updating and adding to those. I will make sure that they're still there. It's my understanding that they are. And so we most definitely want to provide resources to folks when we come across things that we think are good for them. We also, in equity and diversity, as you might remember, long ago, we had education and development was a part of OED's mission. For a while, we had really discontinued that. But that is back. So if you were interested in having someone come and talk to your folks about, you know, how they might use their diversity action plans for their college or unit or whatnot, and how they might inform that and help that push down, that would be helpful as well. We have folks who could do that in our division as well.
The next question is one that I'm happy to take, Catrice. The question, or it's not really stated, well, it is a question. Staff have been told it's impossible to get a 5. Is that accurate? That is not accurate, because if it were impossible, I guess we would probably have a scale of 1 to 4. But it is true to say that getting a 5 should be extremely challenging, and it should be a very high bar for someone to accomplish, to truly say that they consistently exceed the expectations. I think that given, you know, the incredible amounts of responsibility that each of our positions hold at the university, attaining a 3, which is, you know, in my mind, you're solidly doing all of the functions of your job, even that, you know, sometimes can be quite challenging. It can, occasionally exceeding, which is a 4, is extremely challenging. Consistently exceeding is extremely hard. So my answer to the question is no, it's not impossible. And if someone's department is being told that, I, you know, perhaps would like to have some discussion with that department, because I think it's problematic to say you can never get a 5 when we do have a 5 included in our evaluation tool. Here's a great question, and it's probably one for both of us, Catrice, because I'm sure that we sometimes scratch our head about this too. Why is it that some places say diversity, equity, and inclusion, and some say diversity and inclusion, and some say diversity, inclusion, and engagement? I think it's a difficult question, but I think it's a fair question to ask. Do you want to take a stab at it, and I'll jump in with you?
Sure, I think so. You know, I think a lot of it has to do with what your preferences are at your particular institution. The bottom line, regardless of how you, which words come first or which ones you use, the bottom line is this: you're talking about access and you're talking about equity. Okay, those are the bottom line. No matter whether you think in terms of diversity, which we often talk about as being a fact, you either have diversity or you don't. Right? Those are the numbers. If you were to count X, Y, and Z, how many veterans you have, how many disabled persons you have, or whatever, that's diversity. That's a fact. Okay. Inclusion, again, I think I mentioned that is more of what happens once you're given the invitation. Do people make efforts to make you feel a part of? Are you asked to dance if you were invited to the dance, for example? That's what you're talking about with respect to there. Equality and equity are not considered to be exactly the same thing. Equality talks about, generally speaking, giving every single person the exact same thing, okay? Equity talks about more in terms of giving each person what they need to succeed. So say, for example, you might think of a door. If somebody were able to, let's say you had a door and you made sure that it had the proper poundage so a person should be able to access it, even if they were in a wheelchair. But let's say, for example, that it is technically compliant, legally compliant, if you will, but then for whatever reason, there's something about this door, the way it's designed, maybe 90% of the people can get through the door in a wheelchair, but there's that 10% that has some difficulty. So equality provided, absolutely. Equity, not so much, because there's still that 10% that won't be able to get there. So there, we're trying to think about it through an equitable lens, would be obviously more fair, if you would, than equality. And then finally, engagement. That's like for us, we know that Tennessee, the University of Tennessee, is present in every single county, right? So for us, engagement means to make sure that people know that we're there and to make sure that they realize that they can reach out to us to help, to partner with us, to help them find solutions or to get things done in their community. So that's a kind of long answer, but that's what you see, some combination, institutional equity. There are all kinds of phrases throughout, and it's just a matter to some extent of preference, what makes people feel good or what have you. I hope that helps.
I think that really helps. And it actually, I'm gonna jump from the word engagement into our next question. The question is, how does an employee who has minimal interactions with others satisfy the diversity and inclusion category? Can you share some examples? So I would say I can think of a couple of roles on campus that have maybe less interaction with internal peers or external peers than others, but I can't think really of any role on any shift here where you have nothing to do with anybody. So I think there are always opportunities, regardless of how big or small your quote unquote team is at the university, where you are going to have interaction, and you do have the opportunity in every single interaction to treat the individual that you're dealing with kindness and respect. Other opportunities that individuals in this category, so to speak, might have, maybe they are a person who takes part in interviews when new individuals are hired. So how do they handle themselves in interviews? Do they give feedback about the interview process, about whether or not the department is running the most inclusive search process as possible? Might they have some input into how we onboard individuals, how we retain people? I think that even people who are in jobs where they may not have as much interaction day to day certainly should be aware also of their diversity action plan for their area and have opportunities to connect to that and make a significant difference for their department. So I think this is such a good question because it's one of the most frequently asked questions that I've gotten since this new category was announced. And I think we really have to spend time thinking through some of those positions and think deeper than just their day-to-day work life, all the components throughout the year where they might have opportunity for input. Catrice, do you want to add anything to what I've said?
I would like to add a couple things, but I also saw something flash up in the chat that I want to touch on at the end of this. And that is, I'd like to say that for one thing, remember that regardless of what you're doing, your processes are governed by policies and procedures. So you could also think in terms of what it is that you do on a daily basis. Is there something about something you've encountered and you think, this job could be done by other kinds of folks if, we didn't have these roadblocks, for example, maybe something pertaining to access, or this would be an opportunity if we really reached out and engaged, veterans in the community. They could really enhance what we're doing in this area. So it's thinking outside of the box, not just narrowly focused on what it is that you are doing. The other thing I would add is that we are all ambassadors for the university. So diversity and inclusion work doesn't just happen from 8 to 5 when you're here at the university. Every time you step outside and you represent yourself in any way, and somebody has occasion to know that you're a employee of the University of Tennessee, we would like to think that your uh, department would let them know that you work for a place where you're really proud of it and that all kinds of people are there and they are welcome to be there. So you are ambassadors for the university at all times. And so I would just encourage you to think beyond the 8 to 5. And then I saw a question pop up in the chat that talked about, how much time would a person need to spend on diversity and inclusion to be compliant? I think it was, they were saying they had somebody on their staff. I would submit to you that diversity and inclusion is your work all day long from 8 to 5. And what I mean by that is, say, for example, we have this staff person who answers the phone. Every time they pick up the phone and they say the University of Tennessee, College of such and such, or what have you, it should be clear in their voice and their demeanor and their willingness to help and assist the person on the other line that they are inclusive in their thinking. There is nothing about their response to that person on the other end of the phone that should suggest that they are not inclusive. So we're talking about your efforts woven through every single thing that you do all day long. It should become second nature so that you're not thinking about it. And I would submit to you that in many instances, most of us are engaged in the kinds of activities and attitudes and values that we are talking about already. We all have work to do. I'd like to think that I could just roll in and get a 5 in this category, but I don't think so. I think even I have work to do, even though for me, there's some lived experience in this. So, I would submit to you that it's, there are no boxes to check. There are no boxes to check. This is all day, every day.
So you just answered another question, because one other question that came in said, how will D&I appear in the OPR? I'm throwing around a lot of acronyms this morning. Okay. Will we be asked to ask questions, check boxes, etc.? And the answer just came from Catrice Morgan. You can quote her here. This is not a box checking activity. And I'm being facetious, but I'm actually not, because this is a real question that we're getting. And the answer is, it will be evaluated just like the other 4 categories, through conversation, through goal setting, through assessment of your year, our years, etc. A couple of other just mechanics I'd like to address here. There's a question, can UT share examples of what is successful on campus now so other departments can piggyback? I just want to sort of share, on the HR website, we have some training. If, for example, one of the things that you and your supervisor talk about, or some additional educational opportunities, we've got a dynamic and ongoing list of educational opportunities, things like additional webinars, commission meetings, a whole bunch of things that this campus is doing a ton on this front. So we are going to be updating that list, and it's on the HR website. We also have on there a couple of examples of SMART goals around this. And some of them are actually examples that I have used on some of my reviews. And the one observation, Catrice, that I would make is, because I have another question, if we read a book, do we need to provide a report? So, they're really good questions. And I think we need to acknowledge that we're just at a starting place with this. For some individuals, reading a book and having some discussion or talking about what they learned in a staff meeting after reading the book, that could be a really large step for that person or their department. Other people are, already, as Catrice said, so active in diversity and inclusion already, so their goals are going to look quite different. I mean, Catrice has diversity in her title, so setting goals for her is going to look very, very different. But I think those are really good questions, and it tells me people are starting to really think about, okay, what could this look like? I think maybe, Catrice, would be a good idea for us to loop in some conversation about diversity action plans here as people are talking about goals. You want to talk a little bit about how that could be a starting place for people?
Okay, so, the larger, the colleges and larger units were asked to complete diversity action plans. And it's my understanding they've all been reviewed, and if they're not finalized, they're close to being finalized. And so one of the things that I think we need to make sure that is happening is that the goals have been set around diversity and inclusion and equity in those plans. We need to make sure that we're sharing those goals and objectives, through the ranks. We need to make sure that, we like to say things trickle down. We need to make sure that everybody in that unit or that college or division could talk about the things that are in that plan that we're trying to accomplish in each one of those units. And so those things, that plan can help inform the goal setting that needs to happen there. And one of the things that I would encourage you all to do as you're thinking about, goals for the future for each employee is to ask the employee, like you would with any of the other categories, what is it that you have done to respect human beings here on campus? What have you done? Okay. And so we know that there are things that we're doing across the board, at the university level. We know there's, for example, Title IX training that we all have. We know there's Title VI training that we have. Yes, those things are mandatory, but they are informing, our consciousness, if you will, about how we treat other people with respect and dignity. And at the end of the day, that is what this is about. And I would submit to you that I'm reasonably certain that everybody, I'd like to think, this is my university, I like to say. So I'd like to think that everybody is engaged in some form of activity every day that is creating a more inclusive environment here at the university. So you might start with, what are you doing already? And then broaden out to, what are things that you think you could do better or you like to spend more time with? And like I said, I think the key here is to think broadly, to think of diversity in all of its aspects. We think of diversity broadly. We're not just talking about race or sex or gender or those things. We're broadly veteran status, disabled persons, anything that makes you unique. The fact that you may be you may deal with a lot of first generation students, for example. The fact that you may have quite a few people in your area that are citizens of different countries, or whatever it is that's bringing a mix to your organization that's different and unique, that's adding, I'd like to say, flavor to it. My family's from New Orleans, so everything's about flavor for me and taste. But those are things that you're going to want to pay attention to.
I changed slides on you there midstream, Catrice, because we have a question asking about the definition of DEI in the new category. So what I've just kind of put up here is our systems instruction for this new category. I'm not going to read it out loud, but if folks want to take a picture of it or whatever, it's sort of the guiding principle around this category. It's very broad. Necessarily so, but I just wanted to share that there. And Catrice, forgive me, I'm going to try to get us through as many more questions as we can in our remaining time. All of my staff are active duty military or friends. Do they need a review? So the answer to that is, on the friends category, no. We only do staff reviews for regular staff. So if you have individuals who are active duty and are on orders and called up at this moment, you can defer their review in the OPR system and do it when they are back on campus or at work or remote or whatever that is. But no, I think the question is, do I try to get this from them if they are called up? And the answer is no. Let's talk with them when they get back. And the person's second question is, if I don't have to do reviews, how do we hold people accountable for D&I? So I think that question on friends is an interesting one, because right now they do not receive a review, but I wouldn't be upset if our folks who are in those friend relationships with us also understand the importance of diversity and inclusion to our work. So how that happens in your department, I guess we don't really manage from a central perspective, Catrice, but I don't think we say we don't have that conversation with friends. I think it's kind of a different conversation.
And I think it is important to have that conversation with friends. Anybody who has a relationship with the university, who's holding themselves out, is connected to us in a special way, needs to understand what we're trying to do and accomplish. Because I will tell you that a person simply being a friend does not prevent them from being complained about in the Office of Equity and Diversity. I have seen a complaint that involved a friend, and we had to track that down, but we did. So, excuse me, again, thinking in terms of everybody is an ambassador for the university, everybody is a recruiter for the university. So I think we need to, at least have some conversations, generally speaking, about what it is that we believe to be important, what it is that we value.
And we have somebody who'd like to share a quote from your boss. Diversity is who you invite to your house, and inclusivity is how you treat them. So he's here in spirit with us.
He is. I've quoted him, and he's been quoted again. Yeah, but there are a number of different versions of that, and the name escapes me now, but the one with the dance is the one that.
Yeah, I like that one too. A couple of HR kind of questions. Does HR have education for departmental staff? Absolutely. Contact employee relations and we'll get something set up for you to do with your work group. Is there a central place that houses diversity action plan? I think those are going to all be put online shortly, Catrice, is that correct?
That's my understanding. But they will, I think they will reside, I'm sure on the colleges and divisions websites, but certainly it's my understanding that they will be on our division's website, which is diversity and engagement.
Okay. How do we import goals in OPR? As of right now, you cannot import last year's goals because we don't have last year's reviews in there, but going forward, we will. I'd also refer you to the FAQs on the HR site to learn more about that. How do we get employees to accept that a 3 is a great score and worthy of merit? I think a couple of things. Sometimes I have worked with departments to recalibrate scoring in their area. In some areas over time, or depending on the supervisor style, it begins to look like Lake Wobegon, where everybody is amazing. And that may be the truth, or that may not be quite accurate. And it's sometimes the case that when a new leader takes over an area, they assess in a slightly different way, or they feel that there is some inflation happening. And we can do a recalibration in such a way that it is not damaging to the employees who are affected. And if you want to talk about that, call employee relations. But a 3 is a very solid score. And I think I mentioned earlier, our jobs are really jam-packed. Our jobs at UT are not fluff. They are full, they are hard. And a 3 shows that you are doing every aspect of your position description in a really solid and consistent manner. How do I get an employee to believe that? I think, again, let's start by looking at your departmental scores. And are you really doing a true evaluation across the board of staff? Or do we have a situation where someone who is maybe not such a strong performer is getting scores far above 15? That makes it a little bit hard for others to think of 15 as a worthy, solid score. The other question I think comes in around merit pay. How do we address a 3 with merit pay? Do we not? I mean, I think that's a departmental discussion. So interesting questions coming through here, Catrice. Let's get a couple more in, but we are getting just over time. Some D&I work happens off the clock and becomes invisible labor. How will this be addressed? My opinion, I'll share mine, and then I know you want to share yours too. Invisible labor should be made visible through the performance review process. This is a great time for leaders to learn what might be happening in the spaces where they're not present or they're not aware of these conversations and lifts by some members of our community. I mean, women, people of color, LGBTQ+. I can go down the list of people who may be engaged in invisible labor of counseling, of supporting, of advising, a whole plethora of activities. And I think the performance review is a great opportunity. Catrice, what would you add to that?
The only thing I'd add there is I think that's a perfect opportunity where in looking to develop goals for next year, you start talking about what are the things that the person thinks that they're already doing, that they've already done in that area. And I think if we look at it with a very broad lens, I think we're going to find that people are doing a lot more than we realize and that they realize. But it's absolutely perfect time to talk about, let's list these things out. Let's bring them to light. Let's make them visible, just as you indicated.
I think we are over time, and I know people have other engagements. We'll start dropping off. So, Catrice, are there any closing words that you would like to share with our participants today?
The only thing I would encourage everyone is to, try to keep an open mind with this. I know this is new. I know it is, it's daunting. That's true for everybody. Anytime you introduce something new, it's different. But I want to assure everyone there are no check boxes. There's no, magic answer, no magic response. I think it's going to be very individual to the analysis will be very individual to the individual, to the employee himself or herself, and also to, each of the divisions and offices. So I would encourage you to, not be, daunted by the task. It is simply something new. It's something we can work through together. And there's a lot of flexibility there. It's very broad on purpose because we recognize that, truly being respectful is where you start. Being respectful is where you start.
I appreciate that, Catrice. I'll just add and then close that this is a day that many of us some time ago would never have been able to predict, that we would be kind of baking into the day-to-day work that we do, an appreciation and emphasis on diversity and inclusion. It's a really exciting time, but I really, Catrice, just want to second what you said, that anything new, I think people need to be open and admit, hey, this is new. I don't quite know how to go about this as the employee. Maybe we have supervisors that are, trying to figure out how to go about this new category also. I think a little bit of authenticity as you work through the newness of this would go a long way. Yes. And again, we're just starting out. We'll just keep talking about this and call our offices, anything we can do to support your departments as you work through this. I know that both Catrice's area and mine are there to help. So thank you, everybody. Catrice, I so appreciate being on here together with you this morning. It's been really fun. Great questions. And more to come. Have a good day, everybody.
Thank you. Goodbye, everyone.